Thanks for joining me, David. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure being here on the show with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here too. I've been excited. I mean, gone through a lot of the work. I like people that get their hands dirty. I like the people that have calluses from deployment and having actually kind of done it in the space. There's a lot of people that talk about it. It's hard to actually do. And based on background and stuff, writing 2 books and things like that, it's clear that you've been thinking about this space for a very long time and in a lot of depth. For those that don't know, David wrote Soulful, and most recently Exponential Era, both topics that are super interesting to me. If we can, chronologically, you tell me a little bit about how you came to write Soulful, and then after that, Exponential Era. What was the logic between the two? A little bit about the books, if you can, too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the Exponential Era actually came first. And so that book, the way that book came about is I was working with a partner, and we were having discussions about how nations' ability to deal with these changes, because they are happening so fast and at such a profound level that we thought it would be interesting to write a book about these exponential platforms and to provide some guidance to organizations and executive teams on how to deal with these changes. So in the book, we talk about 8 platforms that are growing exponentially. And we also provide a methodology that we call SPX, Strategic Planning for the Exponential Era. And the idea behind SPX is we didn't reinvent the wheel. There's nothing really novel about the way we go about advising companies to deal with these changes, but it's really a combination of several methodologies, things like Agile and design thinking and Buddha. So we put all of these components together, and we provided a roadmap for companies to deal with experimentation, deal with fast changes, putting stuff out there, being agile, and moving forward, and not getting stuck in the old ways of doing things. So that was the first book. And one of the things that I realized as I was doing the research for that book was that AI was about to explode. And AI, I thought, was going to be the most impactful, transformational technology that we have ever invented. And so I felt a need to write a book specifically about AI, and that's how Soulful came about. But I wanted to give it a little bit of a different flavor to it. So the first book was very business oriented. And the second book is more about how we as humans and how we as a society can deal with the changes that are being brought about due to AI. How can we collaborate with these machines? How can we prepare ourselves for the changes that are coming, and that are coming at unprecedented speed? So that's how I came up with Soulful.
How do you do it?
How did I do it?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, these are big questions, right? I remember sitting with a handful of our team members, we're basically in a spot where we're not going to be poor again. How do we build for the next 10, 20 years? What are we going to build? We actually had the luxury of that moment. And I remember sitting at a cafe in downtown Salt Lake City and literally just going, wait, what is this technology going to do to the world? Right. And having some smart people surrounding me and being able to kind of hypothesize and do those thought experiments of all right, repetitive tasks are gone. What does work look like now? We had everything hypothesized. I mean, we were that day, I remember bringing up people are going to write code, and then they'll probably use the blockchain or something else to basically stamp that code as theirs. And then anytime that code gets referenced, they'll get some sort of a licensing fee, and people won't have an hourly wage. They'll basically be writing novel code snippets or something similar and getting paid. I mean, what did you hypothesize on how the world would look when you did it?
Yeah, so I lean towards an optimistic view of AI, and that's something that I wanted to bring to the book, is explain this is what this technology is, and this is what it isn't, right? Because I think it's important to make that distinction. And I am very clear on making sure people understand the difference between dealing with a machine and dealing with a human being. It's two separate things, and that's part of the message behind Soulful is that we as humans, we have intelligence that goes beyond the analytical skills that machines are capable of doing at speeds that we could never match. But we have other kinds of intelligence. We have emotional intelligence. We have the ability to relate to other people and build trust and have empathy. And those skills are very, very valuable in the world at large. And so I think people that are creative, people that are learning about this technology, leaning in, engaging with the technology, I think people will do very well. So I am optimistic from that standpoint. Now, in the short term, there's going to be some turbulence. There's no question about it. We're going through an epic change management scenario here. I spent my entire career dealing with change, bringing new technologies to organizations, and change is always hard. I've never been through a change process that was easy. People don't like to change. And so this is no different, but this is happening much, much faster than we've ever experienced before. I don't believe we as a society are ready for what's about to come. And what's happening right now, it's going to be very impactful. And there will be some pain along the way. But I think if we keep the long-term view in mind, I think the benefits will outweigh the risks. So it is possible, if you listen to Elon talk about abundance, right? So Elon is planning on creating billions of humanoid robots that will produce everything that we need. And he talks about, material needs being fulfilled. And so you don't need to work anymore because everything that you need will be available to you at a very low cost. And I lean towards that vision as well, but I think it's going to take a long time for us to get there. I don't think it's something we can expect to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. It's a long-term view. And in the meantime, in the book, I talk about the chasm between the realities that we're facing right now and this grand vision of a bright future. In between, there's a big chasm that we need to deal with, and that's where the change management process comes in.
What are the biggest mistakes that people are making right now when you're doing the implementation that you see? Like, how do you kind of manage expectations and kind of help people prep for, all right, again, to your point, this isn't easy, never is. What are the common mistakes that people are making the most often in this scenario and situation?
I think one common mistake that I see and that I hear about as well is people are hearing about AI and they're getting the command from up above, from the board, from the CEO, that we must be an AI company. We must use AI. So let's go do AI. But they forget to ask the question, what is the problem we're trying to solve, right? So one of my pet peeves with what I'm seeing with AI implementations is we must ask first, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? AI cannot be a solution looking for a problem. We need to find the problem that we're trying to solve and see if AI is the right fit for it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. AI is not necessarily the right solution for every problem. But it all starts with defining what problem you're trying to solve. And then the second step is to put together a strategy. Where are you at in terms of positioning yourself strategically in reference to AI? And there's a great framework that was put together by McKinsey, and I like the way they think of it, and I like the terminology, so that I've borrowed that terminology to explain a way for you to build a strategy around AI. And it's called makers, shapers, and takers. Let me explain what that is. So makers are the companies that are investing heavily in AI. They have a great appetite for risk. They are creating these new models. They're spending billions and billions of dollars because it's very capital intensive. And there are very few companies in a position to be a maker. So those are the OpenAIs of the world, and Google and Microsoft and Amazon and so on and so forth. And then you have, at the other extreme, we have the takers. So the takers are the companies that don't leverage AI as a competitive advantage. They just use AI as it becomes available, mostly through the vendors that they are already using. And so
Hmm.
those vendors make AI available as part of their software, and they leverage that AI. It's not a competitive advantage, but they are keeping up with the industry.
Sure.
Now, where it gets interesting is the shapers, right? Because that's where there's a whole spectrum of things that you can do with AI that can help you improve your business processes, improve customer service, helps you come up with new solutions to bring to the market. And you can do anything from, just being better at prompt engineering all the way to using RAG, to fine tuning, to creating AI agents. So there's a whole spectrum of things that you can do with AI as a shaper. So the first decision that I think you need to make is, what problem am I trying to solve? And what am I? Am I a shaper, a maker, or a taker?
Hmm. Kind of like early and late adopters and kind of the innovators in that market then.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. How do you know who's who? When you sign up and like, I mean, for your clients, as you were describing it, I was thinking in my mind's eye about the clients and I'm going, man, those takers are very difficult. They want the lowest prices. They want the most proven technology. They presume that it's plug and play and that it's easy. In my experience, I go every time I get one of those kind of takers, I'm trying to work them completely out of the ideal customer profile because they have expectations that I think right now are not realistic in most cases. I don't think
Yeah.
they realize how early we are in this entire space still. Like there's a lot of disruption happening, and simultaneously, it's not nearly refined enough for a lot of their tastes, right?
Yeah. And I think that's an important conversation that we need to have with our clients, right? Let's understand what your business is all about. Let's understand what your business strategy is. And let's see if AI makes sense as a competitive advantage or not. Because for a lot of companies, it does not. And it's totally okay for you to be a taker. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
a taker, you're probably not interested in some of the services that you and I have to offer. So it ends the conversation there. Let's spend our time with the shapers that are much more interesting.
I appreciate the abundance. I mean, I still see a lot of challenge where there's the difference because oftentimes it's kind of like the premise of at least like a lot of people, kind of seeing the jobs and things that are disrupted. They're saying just, well, when is that? It's kind of like trickle down economics, right? It's like, yeah, well, the trickle down and we'll happily share the wealth. And people are going, I haven't felt anybody sharing it yet.
Yeah.
And maybe there isn't that much to share yet. Oftentimes, when you look at the earnings associated with OpenAI and stuff, you're going, they're burning a lot of cash,
Yeah.
pretty massive amounts. And a lot of the times, too, like the different companies that are talking about, MIT released a report talking about 95% of AI initiatives don't yet have an ROI. Dig in deeper and you go, well, a lot of them weren't even set up to even track an ROI. So that's a big part of that is, to your point, they didn't identify and define the problem well. So therefore they don't know what the ROI is because they never actually benchmarked it.
Right.
It happens a
Yeah.
lot.
So these are early days, right? So we need to keep that in mind. We're just in the beginning of this journey. The exponential curve, once we get past that inflection point, these changes are going to come super fast. They're already starting, but we're still in the early days. And so I think people have to keep their expectations in line with, the period that we're in right now, which is we're investing heavily in this technology, to your point. And there's a lot yet to be discovered. We have come up with this incredible breakthrough, which is the transformer architecture,
Mhm.
which, everything is based on the transformer architecture, and it has taken us this far. But most people believe, or the people that are really deep in the technology, I think they believe that transformer is not going to take us to AGI or to something equivalent to AGI. We need some new breakthroughs. We need some new research that are going to allow these machines to learn more the ways that humans learn, and go through the self-improvement process. We're starting to see some of that, but we're not quite there yet. So it's going to take time before we generate the abundance that can be distributed to everyone. And then even then, there's still the question, uh, how's that going to work, right? How are we going to do that? And there's all kinds of proposals out there. People talk about UBI, they talk about taxing the robots, and there are different ways that we can go about distributing this wealth. I lean towards, counting on deflation, because technology is deflationary by nature. And so if you look at the cost of telecommunication, for instance, it's come down tremendously in the last 20 years. And I think if we produce efficiently and sustainably, over time, the cost of goods should go down. And if it goes down for everybody. So the whole problem of distribution goes away because the prices are lower for everybody. So we're going to have this inflationary and deflationary fight for quite some time. And hopefully someday we'll produce enough abundance sustainably so that the cost of goods will be low enough that even if you don't have a great amount of income, you can still be able to live a life of dignity.
I think that makes sense. I mean, you hear a lot about people talking about how they are expecting wages haven't risen enough. And then people constantly talk about, yeah, but you carry around in your pocket the more than the amount of technology it took to get man on the moon and stuff like that. Right. And so therefore it's like, you may not feel rich, but would you trade spots with even someone in like 1920 or something like that? It's like, no, I would, would you rather be the richest person in 1920 or median household income in 2025? It's like, they didn't have carpet most places back then. You were still dealing with probably not having indoor plumbing. So, you may not have everything you see on your Instagram reel. But that being said, you still actually probably have a lot of creature comforts that you might not respect enough. And I know we're pretty bad at actually making that kind of comparison, right?
Yeah, and just imagine where we're going to be in 20 years or 30 years, or 50 years. I think, when we look back, it's going to be unrecognizable. Just like when we look back to the 1920s or to the 1800s and we look at life back then, it's like, how do they live like that? I think 50 years from now, we're going to look back to today and it's going to be the same kind of thing,
Now, you mentioned you wrote Soulful more recently, correct?
Yeah.
From your encompassing and your experience, was that the kind of thought process in Soulful? I mean, because there you're talking about like, well, what are we going to do? Because, it's weird. Like everything from like Karl Marx manifesto was talking about, well, if we distribute these little communes, we're basically only going to have on average, I think it was like 2.5 hours of work he estimated per day that people would have to do. And he'd go, you're going to have all this free time. And that's why arts and other things are going to flourish, is you're going to have all this free time. Yep. And a big part of what I'm kind of thinking is right now, I feel like there's not enough hours in the day. I sign off at like 6 p.m. and still go, holy crap, I barely even got to the pile of work I really wanted to do. I was putting out fires and doing this, that, and the other. Looking forward to the point where, and it's happening now, I'm getting and becoming more of a curator. The incremental cost of creating content is almost zero. I can come up with massive amounts of content very quickly and inexpensively. So can everybody else. For that matter, I think the quality demanded is going up as well, right? Now if you put out a blog post or whatever else, it better be good. And I simultaneously go like, if I have these little fiefdoms, I've seen a few people estimate what they look like. They're going, you're not just going to necessarily have one agent. You're probably going to have something closer to like 7. And I think I have 4. I use about 4 regularly right now every day.
Yeah.
I've got my Dan bot, which is kind of like my clone, right? He basically has a bunch of my writing and a bunch of studies and stuff that I get asked about regularly. So he can pull up facts and I can ask him questions about like, wait, what was this thing? And I simultaneously go, man, I would love the day where I go, hey, I've only been at work for 4 hours and I have nothing else on my plate. I mean, getting closer. I definitely find myself, my work is becoming more and more about staying ahead of a lot of other people. They kind of come to me and we're like, hey, what's real and what's the trend and what are we deploying or not? And cool. So they're kind of starting to pay me to do that for them because a lot of them are already tired and I understand it. It's exhausting. But man, there's that transition where I go, man, I would love to be in a situation where I just have a bunch of extra hours throughout the day. And, all of those 7 agents are just running 24/7, doing and commenting and answering questions and proposals and filling out updates and client check-ins and everything else. And I go,
yeah, man. And it's not a new promise, right? I mean, we heard this way back when PCs came out, right? PCs are going to make your life so easy. You don't have to do, you're going to cut your hours to 30,
Yeah,
20 hours per week. It hasn't happened yet, right? So, and then
maybe.
email came along and, email just consumed all your time. So, we haven't seen that promise yet. Now, I think in the long run, it's possible that AI and humanoid robots and all this technology is going to take away the need for us to do the kind of work that we don't want to do. The manual labor, the stuff that is boring, the stuff that is just, moving data around and that kind of thing. And that opens up the possibility for us to be more creative, right?
Mm.
Be doing things that we enjoy doing more. And, does that mean you're going to work less hours? Maybe not. If you're a creative person, you have all of this stuff available to you. You can be even more creative. And that may mean you're going to work longer hours because you enjoy what you're doing, you love what you're doing. And so I think people are going to have to really rethink about what is the reason why I do what I do? What's my purpose, right? And I think over time, people are going to become more introspective and try to align their purpose more with their work and with life in general. I hope that's where we go with this.
I hope so. I remember being really dissatisfied with one of my jobs and going and seeing if I could help build kind of a revised employee satisfaction kind of report to see if we could help people get closer to working on tasks that they really enjoyed and finding out how messed up all the incentives are in the workplace right now. Like,
Yeah,
money doesn't work nearly as well as people think it
yeah,
does, right? There's a lot
yeah.
of other options in terms of like promotions, titles, expanded responsibility, time off, a lot of things that aren't money that actually are very much drivers of people
Yeah, I
and
talk
motivation.
quite a bit about that in the book, by the way, and so forth.
Do
I talk
you?
about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and I mean it's very interesting how it works. Because science has shown that for creative kind of work, extrinsic rewards don't work all that well, right? If I just tell you, hey Dan, I'm gonna give you more money, but you need to come up with some really new creative things in the next 10 minutes, you're going to go, oh, wait a second. Your brain is actually not going to be able to do that effectively. Whereas if you're intrinsically motivated, studies have shown that intrinsic motivation is aligned well with, creativity. And so it changes, the way we go about motivating people. It changes organizational behavior. It changes everything. So it's a pretty deep transformation.
I like that idea. I like that premise. I think that would be much more satisfying for people. And it is really interesting when you get to see them working on things that really tickle their fancy. The
Yeah.
really kind of cool nuances and the panache that you get out of that work. That stuff is very, 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 very interesting to me. I hope so. I very much hope so. When you're building agents, tell me a little bit about those. Like, how did you come to the conclusion? Is it Xena?
It's
Xena?
Xena. So
Xena.
yeah. So
You've got
Xena
your
is
own
like
kind of
my
personal assistant of sorts.
my personal assistant, my first attempt to create an agent or an assistant that can help me do my work more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing that is important to me is I need to be able to trust this agent that's working with me, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think the way I've gone about creating that trust is by training this agent to know more about what my values are, know more about what I'm interested in, know more about the things that I like to talk about, and learn more about what matters to me. And so over time, Zena has learned, through the books that I've written, I've shared with Zena, and the podcast, and the newsletter, all the things that she works with me on. She is learning how I operate and what I like and what I value. Now, I do have concerns about AI agents in general if they're not grounded in the way that I'm trying to do with Zena. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a couple of examples. So I'm sure you've heard that OpenAI is considering putting advertising into their
Yeah.
solution, right? And I don't know if you saw the ads from Anthropic. I thought they were they were fascinating. I think they were great.
Yeah.
And it makes us ask the question, do I really trust my AI agent? And if
Yeah.
that AI agent is motivated by other commercial interests, right,
Sure.
then I lose that trust. Then there's no point in having that agent anymore. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's one aspect of it. That trust is so fundamental that anything that breaks that trust, I think, is going to diminish the value of these agents. Then you have the whole issue of security and privacy. And you just look at what's happening with this open claw thing. It's insane, right? and
Yeah.
and we have these millions of agents that are coming out of nowhere with no basic security infrastructure in place. And so, people have found all kinds of security vulnerabilities. And you could have these AI agents using your credentials, using your credit card, and doing things that you just don't know what they're going to do with it. So those are some of the concerns that I have with agents. And I think having the right governance, getting the right
Uh-huh.
guardrails in place, especially if you are using AI agents in a business, is absolutely fundamental.
When you're training, Zenit, are you accomplishing that through memory, through additional system instructions, through documents, through additional governance, like pitting one agent against the other before they respond and answer? What's kind of the approach that you're largely taking to mitigate those?
Yeah, so my approach has been quite simple, nothing too sophisticated. So I use RAG to train Xena.
Mm-hmm.
So RAG is a retrieval augmented generation. Basically, what you can do is you can take any of these models that are available to us, whether it's OpenAI or Gemini or Anthropic's, and you can customize these models so that they know more about who you are, what your knowledge base is, if you're a company, what your products are, what are the kinds of things that you want to do from a customer service standpoint, what's your culture like. And you can train these systems through RAG is one option. You can do fine tuning is another more technical option as well. And these
Mm-hmm.
systems become more knowledgeable in the things that you feed it. And we won't get into the technical details here, but you're basically sharing your knowledge base with these systems. And that's what I've done with Xena. Now, the memory piece is getting better and better, right? So these systems are now able to remember larger amounts of information. And so every time I have a podcast and I bring Zena into the conversation and she asks questions, she provides opinions, she interacts with the guest, she's learning, and
Mm-hmm.
I think this is it's an ongoing process.
Gotcha. I always have these because people come in and they go, "Hey, I've built an agent," and I often go, "Cool, you're not done. You've got kind of a 2 week storming, norming, conforming kind of premise where I go like, hey, you've got it made. It'll answer questions and things like that. Any examples and stuff like that from just I always go like, hey, you've made something that can work and answer questions and do a lot of things at scale, including make mistakes at scale.
Yeah.
Uh, and I've had people jump in like, oh, I made it. It must be great. And they're to your point on Claudebot, right? What did it expose? Something like I don't know, thousands of accounts, many tens of thousands of API credentials that were all tied to it. I mean, like the infrastructure was very, very, easy to hack. Someone did it in like a few hours or something like that. And to some extent, I think it's one of those kind of good news, bad news types of things where you're just going, okay, cool. It's been out for like 2 weeks or something like that, and already had a massive security event to just kind of notify people like, heads up, you can make mistakes at scale. And this is
Yeah.
one of those like hopefully not too significant, but I always see, I'm checking my Reddit threads and stuff like that and watching people that are just going, cool, Claudebot, Modbot, whatever its name is today, just deleted my entire personal photos and it did it from the terminal, so I can't get them back. You're just
Yeah.
going, oh, ooh, ooh, watch
Right.
out. But hopefully it becomes one of those shots across the bow. Do you have any other experiences that you've kind of come across where you're just going, ooh, oh, it's capable of doing that? I would find those are fun.
Yeah, so I mean, I've heard of many situations where people have had a bad experience, and so back to the report that you talked about, where 95% of companies were not finding ROI. A lot of times the reason is because you don't have the right governance in place, you don't have the right security people engaged, You don't have the right, strategy. You don't have the right problem defined well enough. And that's why these, implementations don't go so well. So I come from a background of, implementing software where we had some very well thought out testing processes for implementing software. And the beauty of the era that I worked in was that, these systems were deterministic. In other words, I could test all the possible scenarios and make sure that all the possible scenarios came out correctly at the end. And I could use software to do that testing for me. I didn't have to do that manually, but I had that opportunity. These systems are not deterministic, which means you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You can do evaluations and try to test it to the best of your ability. You can have one AI challenge another AI, and I think that will help. But we all got to keep in mind that these systems are not deterministic, and therefore they're subject to failure. And we need to put that into the risk analysis and build processes with guardrails so that if there is a failure, hopefully we detect the failure before it does something catastrophic. And I think that's the challenge that, from an information technology standpoint, every company ought to be looking at. To what extent do I trust my systems, my customers' data to these agents, when knowing that they're not deterministic in nature?
I like that. It is one of the things, like, just in passing, that I've kind of noticed that oftentimes people start with the low code environment, they're chatting with the agent, but as their process matures, the more it actually looks like historical software, right? The more it just looks like API calls and stuff like that. It's like, well, when it's really sophisticated and then you start doing the math, you're like, wait a minute, calling this agent is like 10, 15 times more expensive than it is to just do an API call, right? Yeah. Always measured, like, my best data scientist hires and stuff like that. The really good ones would tell me when the AI was a complete waste, where they would just be like, no, dude, you're trying to kill a fly with a sledgehammer. This is a complete waste of money. Like, just write an if-then statement. And I find that a lot of that, potentially it becomes, again, a good brainstorming, prototyping tool, but that as it becomes more mature, you're actually just writing a more complex kind of software program. It almost evolves into software that people thought they were avoiding. It's like, no, that's the really cheap version. That's the really reliable version. That's the very trustworthy version. That's the one that you actually potentially want to deploy in prod. So it's potentially helping you hammer out and move through the innovation process a hell of a lot faster. But when you try to scale it, again, I don't know what it is, but I think it's 27. You ask the same question about 27 times, and then all of a sudden it seems to take a left-hand turn and start answering the questions differently. It's almost like, were these GPTs like potentially programmed to deliberately break other people's systems at like 27 iterations? So I've definitely noticed a little bit of that. I do agree that the trust is a very, very big deal. And one of those things, software is easier to trust because you know what it's going to do. Or at least generally speaking, you do.
Yeah. And still, right, we've made lots of mistakes with software. Even though we had all the capabilities to test many times, we still made mistakes with software. Now this is 10 times or thousands of times more difficult. And I'm sure we're going to see all kinds of situations where these systems are going to make mistakes. We're going to see things that are going to be disasters in nature. There will be some. We just don't know where it's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen.
I love it. Awesome. You're a fascinating man, Mr. Espindola.
Oh, thank you.
Where can people find you? What's the best place where to look you up? Are you LinkedIn? What's the easiest way to get in touch?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can look me up there, David Espindola, Espindola. I also have a personal website, which is my name, davidespindola.com. And I have the company's website, brainius.com.
Yes, cool. And the podcast as well. Where's the podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Conversations with Zena, my AI colleague. And you can find it in any of the podcast providers out there. You can also interact with Zena. So I've made Zena publicly available. So anyone that wants to chat with Zena, wants to learn more about my work, or wants to learn more about human AI collaboration, that's her expertise, just go to brainius.com/Xena. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and see what you think of Xena.
Awesome. Excellent, sir. Hey, I appreciate your time, David. I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you very much.
So am I. Thank you, Dan.